Thank you, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to give a talk here. And actually, it's not just a talk, because I need your help, too. I'll talk about that later. But in the past 10 years, I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Stephen Kleinberg, who many of you may know that he's the principal investigator for the Kinder Houston Area Survey. So today's talk, I'm going to explain, the trends in the changing demographics and the local economy, and how that may affect education and the growing inequality. So this is the 38th year of the Kinder Houston Area Survey. So in the past 37 years, we've been conducting the interviews with representatives in Harris County and beyond to collect their information as well as their attitudes and the perceptions in responding to the changing demographics and also the society. Several interesting findings that I will share with you, but the first one, I'm going to talk about the epic demographic transformation, the rise of the knowledge economy, and why place matters. As you see that I came here in 2001 as an immigrant, right? I come here for educational opportunities, as many of the immigrants, but in the past almost 2 decades, I've been experiencing the demographic change in this city, as well as eyewitnessing the changing in the society. So I'll talk about it from the immigrant's perspective, rather than for Dr. Kleinberg, he's a white man who's been living here for more than 6 decades or so. 5 decades, I think. But first of all, I want to give a quick overview of the historical background of all of this. So between 1492 to 1965, 82% of all immigrants who came to this country were from Europe, and another 12% African Americans who were brought here as slaves serving for Europeans, and maybe a handful of Chinese and Japanese working as farmers and laborers in California and Hawaii. So everything it's a mix of, at the time, it was a mix of European nationalities, but it's deliberately so because at the time it was operating under one most racist law. It's called National Origins Quota Act. So in 1924, Congress enacted an incredible law that said you can come to this country in direct proportion to which your ethnic and nationality were represented in the 1890 census. So, of course, at the time, most of the nationalities represented in the census is from Northern European countries. And it was like that through the 20s, 30s, 40s, and the 50s, until in the 60s, it cannot survive by the shift brought by the civil rights movement, right? So in 1965, the Congress passed this new law. It says, well, we used to be a racist country, but not anymore, because we're going to give every country recognized by United Nations 20,000 visas per year. And also, we will continue the hallmark of American immigration policy, that is family reunification. On top of that, on top of that, they also add one provision that says if you have professional of exceptional abilities of skills, you can get ahead of the line. So the Congress was debating at the time that the country needs more British doctors and the German engineers. No one has ever thought that it will occur that we'll have African doctors, Indian and Chinese engineers, Filipino nurses who come to this country for good job opportunities and also educational opportunities as well. So here is a chart to show that in the 1965, about 3.5 million immigrants come to this country. About 38% were from European. And then in 1970, about 5 million came. Only 18% were European. And then in 1990, as you see, that's almost 10 million came to this country. And in 2000, 10.5 million. Among them, 88% came from Asia, Latin America, Africa, and the Caribbean. So New York and Los Angeles definitely are the immigrant capital in this country, followed by Miami and Chicago and Houston, San Francisco, Washington, Dallas, San Diego, Atlanta, and Boston, almost across all the cities in the country. We've been experiencing this remarkable demographic change in the past 4 decades or so. So in 1960s and the 1970s, because of the oil boom, most of the migrants who come to Houston were Anglos. So in the 1980s, it's still, it's an Anglo-dominated city. 83% were Anglos. However, because of the oil bust in the 1982, we see that the Anglo population only grew by 1%. Don't read the number 63 and 54 here, just by the absolute population of Anglos, the blue bar, how tall that blue bar is, it only grew by 1%, okay? And then in 2000, actually it dropped. And in 2010, you see that after 1990s, the share of Hispanic populations and other population grew. And then now we have 4.4 million residents in Harris County. 31% were Anglos, and 42% Hispanics, 8% Asians and other ethnic background, and 19% African Americans. So generally speaking, you can see that African American population in the city, it grew by the rate or the speed of the general population growth, about 18 to 20% every decade. However, the Anglo population decreased in the past 3 decades. Hispanic population grew dramatically, right, in this country. So that's one aspect. And spatially, we'll see how they change over the years. The blue areas are Anglo-majority neighborhoods. That says that 50% of the residents in those census tracts or neighborhood are Anglos. So this is a map showing the segregation, racial segregation in 1980s, okay? And this is a map for 1990s, 2000, and 2010. I don't know how to call this color, olive color? That's no majority. So you don't have any racial ethnic group more than 50% in your neighborhood. So that is how that looks. But going back, pay attention to the red area. That's the African American majority. It hasn't changed much, right? It's concentrated on the east side of the city, along 288 and 59. This is a chart to show you the demographics of 8 most diverse large metropolitan areas. The number is a little bit different because this is the metropolitan area. So we have 6.6 million living in Houston MSA. But in comparison, we see that no other metro areas have an even distribution of the 4 racial ethnic group. Houston has 37% Anglos, 17% African Americans, 37% Hispanics, and 9% Asian and others. Dallas is pretty close, but they have more Anglo population or share of Anglo. Here I want to show you another interesting, we call it like 2 revolutions occurring in this country. They go by the name aging and colorizing, and sometimes they refer to graying and browning. I don't really like to call it graying and browning. But the idea is that for our purpose, we see that it is critical to realize Anglo, who are overwhelmingly disproportionately overrepresented among the senior folks on the right side spectrum. And then non-Hispanic whites, all the other groups are like younger cohorts are more likely to be Hispanics and of other racial ethnic background. So at the time, why it is so? Because the baby boomers, that's 76 million who were born between the year of 1946 and 1964. And then it's followed by, they call it the baby bust generation. So there's a huge population in the pipeline moving toward the right spectrum, getting older, and the young people across America disproportionately non-Anglos. So nowhere is clearer than Houston. So this is a chart using American Community Survey data to show you the percentage. And this is the current population of the United States by age group and ethnicity. Right? And then let's look at the population projection. By 2050, what will that look like? So almost 60% senior folks will be are non-Hispanic whites. Right? And then the younger people across America are non-Hispanic, non-Anglo. What does this mean? How people responded to this demographic shift, and what are their attitudes toward immigration? We asked the respondents 3 questions related to their attitudes toward immigration. Do you think immigrants to the United States generally contribute more to American economy than they take? So over the years, you see that the percentage agreeing with this statement goes up among Anglos. So this is how Anglo responded to this change, demographic change in the city. Do you think the United States should admit more or the same number of legal immigrants in the next 10 years or so? That number, went up from 31% all the way to 67%, more than doubled. And then the last question, do you think that the increasing immigration into this country today mostly strengthened American culture? So it is at the time 1997, when we first asked this question, it was 33%, and now it's 54%. So overwhelmingly, the attitudes toward the immigrants are more positive than before. And I also want to show you the attitudes toward immigration among baby boomers, okay? And this is like an aging effect. At the very different time when we ask those questions, how their attitudes change. Still the same questions, but you see that when the baby boomers grew older, actually, and more they responded to those questions more positively. What does that mean? I think their attitudes are changing with the society. and how the political discourse, and also, by more contact with people with different racial ethnic background. What's the difference between this chart and the previous chart? This shows the attitudes toward immigration among 3 different cohorts. Think they are like different generations. Those who were born between 1960 and 1969, those who were born in the 70s, and those who were born in the 80s, right? Different generation. When we asked those questions, they were aged between 25 and 35. So it's the same phase of life when we ask that question, and how they respond to those questions differently. So we see that millennials are more positive in terms of their attitudes toward immigrants. The difference is pretty big, right? 67% among millennials versus those 50% who were born in 1960s. And then next I'll show you 3 charts which shows the interethnic relations, how people rate the interethnic relations differently. When we ask them to rate the relation between Anglos and the blacks, this is how Anglos rate that relation versus African Americans. Right? Over the years, we see the trend, it's going up, it's rising. However, African Americans tend to rate the ratings lower than Anglos. This is between Anglos and Hispanics. Over the years, it grew from 36% all the way to 60% positive ratings. They think everything's, the relation's pretty good. Compared to Hispanics, the trend is pretty similar. Let's look at the blacks and the Hispanics. Similar trend, however, you see that Hispanics tend to rate it lower, the relations lower than Anglos. I don't have the charts for Asians for a reason, because in our survey, we tend to reach only like 8% Asians in this in Harris County, so that's not that reliable. But so we reach more than 500 African Americans and 500 Hispanics every year. So that number is the result is pretty reliable. Then next question about interethnic romantic relations, whether you have dated someone whose racial ethnic background is different from yours. So among Anglos, we see that the young Anglos are more likely to date someone who was not Anglo. And those who are 60 years old or 70 years old has less chance of dating someone who was not Anglo. Like 2 perspectives, right? 2 reasons why it is so. First, their attitudes toward people with different racial ethnic group, they may change. Second, maybe at the time when there are not that many people with different racial ethnic groups around him or her, right? So it's a positive thing to show that their attitudes toward immigrants and people with different colors more positively. So does that mean that there's no racial discrimination in this town? Not really. So this chart is to show a full-time workers' personal income, their personal income versus their assessments of discrimination. So overwhelmingly, African Americans, they feel that they're more often, especially their ethnic group, is often discriminated against in Houston compared to Hispanics, right? And you see that despite the income differences, African Americans are more likely to say their ethnic group is discriminated against versus the Hispanics. Those with a higher income said that only 47% said that my ethnic group is discriminated against in Houston. Okay, on the right-hand side, we asked this question differently. It's more about your personal experience. Have you felt discrimination or discriminated against in Houston because of your ethnicity? So that percentage is lower. However, you still see the difference among Hispanics and Blacks. What's interesting actually is among Anglos, those with lower income said 47% said that they often felt discriminated against in Houston. So that's worth some more qualitative study to understand what do they mean, what kind of racial discrimination or specific actions they feel that they are discriminated against. How they respond to the question about discrimination also has some impact about their political party affiliation. So on the right-hand side, the red bars shows African Americans, their political party affiliation. Dominantly, they're leaning toward or declared to be Democrat, right? And the Hispanics, that's also very interesting. Those who has a lower income are more likely to say they are Democrats, while the group who was more than 75,000 personal income are more likely to be Republican, right? And also, Anglos are still, most of them tend to be leaning toward Republican Party. So first I want to talk about the epic revolution, demographic revolution. And then I want to discuss a little bit about the rise of a knowledge economy. My background actually is in economics. I have a colleague who is teaching microeconomics online for Lone Star College. I don't know if anyone have taken his class. His name is Carlos Viegas. So this is really my stuff. So first I want to show two contrasting economic era. During the first 3 decades after World War II, the average American man doubled his income. The rising tide actually lifts all boats. So the poorest 20% on the right-hand side, the bottom 20%, actually they more than doubled their income, right? And then the top 5% virtually doubled their income. However, what happens in the last 38 years? Between 1980 and 2017, almost all the benefits of economic growth actually goes to the richest 20%, especially most to the top 5%. It's pretty striking, right? The bottom 20% from 1980 to 2017, their income only increased by 8%. Note that everything is adjusted to 2017 dollars. So there's no inflation that impact the numbers. So that's pretty striking. There's a growing income inequality in this country. So education actually is a critical determinant of a person's ability to earn enough income to support its family in the knowledge economy in this 21st century, right? So this is a study done by Georgetown University Center on Education and the Workforce. It shows that in 1973, among all 91 million jobs, 32% doesn't require, high school diploma. 40% requires a high school diploma. Okay, by 2010, actually 60% of all American jobs, that's about 143 million, requires education beyond high school. And then in 2020, that number will grow to 65%. So recently, the Kinder Institute did a cohort analysis tracking 8th graders in Harris County to see their post-secondary outcomes. So this is a cohort we follow when they entered, when they were 8th grade, that's age 13. That was back in fall 1998. We have the cohort size is about 38,000 students in any public school system in Harris County. By 2009, that's 11 years later, only 1/5 of those children, of those students, actually earned post-secondary credentials. Not necessarily a degree program, but some kind of post-secondary credentials. And giving them 6 years more by 2015. I mean, it is a good thing to see that the percentage grows, right, from 21% to 30%. But still, that's a very low number. If anyone is familiar with the Texas education policy, they have something called a 60 by 30. That says by 2030, in Texas, all the we'll have 60% of students who can achieve post-secondary degree. We are so behind. There are a lot that we need to do, right? So this is, but also from the promising side, we see that, we do have that many students, although their experience is prolonged, but they try to get some kind of post-secondary education, even they're almost 30 years old. So later I would talk a little bit about the study that I did with Opportunity Youth. Those are student youth aged between 16 and 24 who are not employed, who are jobless, who are not in the school system. And what does that mean? Well, we found that actually when they graduate from high school, they need to work to support their family. However, over a period of time, I don't know, each one's case is different, but after a period of time, they realize that without a post-secondary credential, it's really hard to find a well-paid job in the city or in United States. And you see my background, I'm from China, and I'm well aware of a lot of economic change in the country as well. So I'll talk a little bit about that later, just from a global perspective, rather than just here, United States. What's happening in other countries, and what does globalization mean? So this is a chart to show you where Texas is among all 50 states in United States. In terms of percent adults with high school diplomas, we're the 49th states. 82%. It's a high number, but we are the 49th state. And then in terms of percent adults with college degree or more, we are the 28th state among 50. Only 30% have college degree or more in Houston. So actually in Houston, there are a lot of job opportunities, especially well-paid job, skilled job, those jobs were filled by migrants from other parts of the city. Other parts of the country. They're coming to Houston for those job opportunities. But what's our responsibility? Is really to educate the children in our region so that they have a better chance to get those jobs, right? But what is striking from the survey data, what we see is that, the percent who's saying education beyond high school is necessary, actually it's declining. Not just with Anglos, among all three racial ethnic groups. Although, Hispanic immigrants have a higher percentage saying that education beyond high school is necessary, the green chart. But overall, in the past 5 years, when we repeat that question, the response we get, the percent who agreeing that education beyond high school is necessary, is declining. So what does that mean? We try to, I think, the survey participants probably is acting to the deepening burden of college loans. And also the growing number of underemployed college students. There's a mismatch between the college students who graduated and what are the jobs available for them to take. So this is another chart to show the perceived importance of education beyond high school. This is the 1 year data. That's the data from last year. Okay? We asked the question differently. In terms, before we asked, to be successful in today's world, is it necessary to get an education beyond high school? So we were thinking maybe respondent explain to be successful, what success means. The definition is different. So we ask specifically, in order to get a job that pays more than $35,000 a year, do you need to have at least 1 or 2 years of education beyond high school? So this is their response. So Anglos, only 42% agree with this statement. And among Blacks and Hispanics, actually almost 60% said yes. To get a high-paying job, you need to have at least 1 or 2 years of education beyond high school. What does that mean? So you cannot criticize African American and Hispanic children to say that they don't think education is important, right? But it has something to do with the education, the quality of education they receive in public schools. So this is very sad to show that, no criticism just, around Houston ISD, but I need to present those numbers to you. So this is the number I got from Houston ISD, facts and the figures. Every year, they publish those numbers online. So this is the percentage of students who tested SAT or ACT, right? Over the years, we see that number, percent tested, actually increased. It was like a 6% or something, probably 5 or 6 years ago. And we see that number increased, all racial ethnic group, more than 90% test SAT and ACT. At least they try, right? They try. However, what's the academic outcome? What's the outcome? So African Americans, only 60.5% is at or above criteria. That's, 1110. That's a low number on the SAT, right? And Asians, 58%, Hispanics, 75%, and whites, more than half, right? So give credit to the school district that they are really trying different programs, different methods to provide the college advising programs for their students, to encourage them to take the test, and also, providing tutoring opportunities so that they could achieve a higher score. Another thing that's more positive or optimistic is that at least the residents in Harris County, they understand how important it is to provide more school funding. So over the years, the percent who are saying significant more money will be needed grew from 38% to 56%. And the red line shows the percent saying the school have enough money if it were used wisely. Okay, that number is 42% last year when we asked that question. So here, I want to present some results, the findings from a study that I did with a group of researchers at the Kinder Institute. It's called Opportunity Youth and Young Adults. This is a group that nationwide people are more focusing on, because this is a group aged 16 to 24 who are unemployed, who are not in the school system. So what are they doing, and what's the population, right? How many children are in this category? Not children, I should say youth and young adults, right? So we were able to provide an estimate. Over the last 3 decades, 1990, it's only 80,000, and it grew to 120,000 almost in 2000. But because of a lot of efforts going on here in Houston, we see that number dropped from 2000 all the way to 2014. It's about 111,000. Basically, that says within the age group 16 to 24, one out of 7 young adults and youth fall into this category. So to help the nonprofits and the key stakeholders in this region, especially philanthropic foundations, to understand the spatial concentration of this group, we create a map using the data to show where those children are. I keep saying children, where those young adults are. So we see that they are all over the place, but the red are those where they are concentrated. Angleton, that's in Brazoria County. I live in Pearland, so that's Brazoria County. Baytown on the east side. Conroe and the Woodlands. And also Humboldt, that's not too far from here. So we zoom into Harris County, and we see that we have some, we call it hot spots, that's where A-Leaf, a Spring Branch on the north side, and the area close to Katy, also on the north side of I-10, and Humboldt area. So we identified a lot of barriers of why those young adults and the youth out of the school system and also unemployed. One critical, so this is the root of disconnection. Where that happen? First, the strain of poverty, and then systematic failures in education system. And next is the workforce barriers and the service gap. They're looking for jobs, but did they get enough service for this group? And the last but not least, low confidence. So this is the one reason why I want to give this talk, because maybe someone in your community who really needs some help, who needs some encouragement, they just need some resources where they should go to get help. I would say if they're looking for jobs, try to contact Workforce Solutions. They have a lot of programs created for this group of young youth and young adults to provide the training opportunities. It's on-the-job training. You can get, you are paid, but also at the same time, your skill will be refined and polished through those training opportunities. So I think I'm running out of time. But I'll just go very quickly to show you 2 maps. On the left-hand side, unemployment, and it's a spatial pattern. And then on the right, the poverty. We combine them, and you see the growing inequality, what's happening in this town. Next, I really want to mention this great study. It's done by a group of researchers in Harvard University and Brown University. I have close relationship with them. This is called Opportunity Atlas. If you go online and Google that, you'll find that these are the key key findings from that study. The rates of upward mobility vary based on where children grew up. So that's one reason why place matters. Neighborhood really matters, because this investment in neighborhood, it happens, right? Especially in southern cities. And growing up in a higher mobility area has a causal effect of children's outcome in adulthood. So it has a lifetime effect. So think about it. And also, a booming economy does not necessarily lead to increased upward mobility. So although in Houston, the local economy is doing really, really great, the unemployment rate is very low, at 3% or something. However, that doesn't mean that everyone gets the benefit from that. So I think those are the key takeaways from today's talk. I know that a lot of you might be affected during Hurricane Harvey, and if you are interested to get more information about, sorry, I'm clicking through my slides. If you want to learn more about the community profile, different community dynamic in Harris County, I would encourage you to go to this website, datahouston.org. It delineated the county into 143 neighborhoods, and it provided information for each neighborhood. And the red circle 135, that's the Kingwood area. Okay, and for those who are interested in this type of talk, you're welcome to sign up a webinar. So, the first one was on Thursday, actually, to talk about the gentrification study that I did recently. And there's another one in April that's about the transportation infrastructure and the safety concern. A group of researchers did a community-based research in Gulfton area to collect information about the street safety issues. And we want to replicate that study in other areas too. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.